Warning. The following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Pastor Robert Norris admitted to sexually abusing a 12-year-old child for years. He is showing all the traits of a narcissistic sexual predator in a pulpit. Stay tuned. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Hanshaw. Welcome to today's broadcast. Today we're going to be discussing Pastor Robert Morris once again. Today we're going to focus on his narcissistic patterns of behavior, shaming the victim, shaming the girl that he molested. Also, Robert Morris's wife, shaming the victim. Completely narcissistic behavior, which is ungodly, and that needs to be repented of. Got some videos for us to watch about what does a narcissist look like. Watch this.
Megachurch founder and pastor Robert Morris has admitted to moral failings following accusations of sexual abuse of a child published online this past Friday. Our Andrea Lucia reports that church leaders say they were aware of what happened.
So God heals, God redeems.
Based in Southlake, Gateway Church is one of the country's largest megachurches.
So you can't redeem yourself.
With about 100,000 people attending every weekend, and 9 locations spread throughout North Texas. Founder and senior pastor Robert Morris reaches even larger audiences in a weekly program posted online and broadcast in more than 190 countries.
It's been pretty devastating.
For Cindy Clemishire, seeing his influence grow has been difficult.
Or how on earth could anyone let him be in leadership when they knew what he did to me?
She was 12 years old when she says Morris began molesting her. He and his wife were friends of her parents who would often stay over. And the abuse, she says, continued for 4.5 years.
He said, "You can never tell anyone because it will ruin everything."
In a statement from the church this weekend, Morris admits to what he describes as inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady for several years in his 20s.
Young lady? I was not a young lady. I was a little girl. I was 12.
The admission came after a blog called The Wartburg Watch shared Clemishire's story. Morris himself describes kissing and petting, not intercourse. Under current law, that's still behavior that could qualify as continuous sexual abuse of a young child, a crime punishable by life in prison. Clemishire says she eventually told her father, who demanded Morris step down from his position at a church that's now Gateway's Grand Prairie campus. Morris says for 2 years he did step down to receive counseling and ministry before returning in 1989 with the full blessing of the elders. Decades later, Clemishire says it's a relief her story is finally out.
Oh, I definitely think the consequences are probably starting. I mean, people know the truth. I know that there's got to be consequences.
In a statement, church elders said that Morris has been open and forthright with them about what they describe as a moral failure on his part, and that he has, in the decades since, quote, walked in purity. No criminal charges have ever been filed in connection to this, and it's unlikely any will be, as the statute of limitations has likely run out on any that could be. Reporting live here in Southlake, Andrea Lucia, CBS News, Texas.
Well, this Robert Morris scandal is not going away. Of course, involving Cindy Clemishire, the story that she told about what happened to her at the hands of, well, the now former Gateway Church pastor, Robert Morris. Of course, we know he resigned on Tuesday, June 18th, but is resigning enough to make up for what has been decades-long horror for Cindy to have to endure, all that she has gone through to try and get her life back on track. I'll answer the question. No, it's not enough for Robert Morris to just resign. This is not going away, because what this has done is this has now opened up the church as a whole to what's really been going on behind the scenes. Damage control being done by the elders. Everybody right now is scrambling to try and get their stories straight, saying that they didn't have any knowledge about what Robert Morris was doing or how old Cindy was when this mistreatment started. And look, the reason this is all happening is because the wolves right now are running scared. You know why? Well, God's got them on the ropes. And judgment starts first in his house. And that's why we are seeing right now a clean sweep that's going on in churches across the country. And it's not going to stop. It's not going to let up anytime soon. They can attempt damage control. They can do whatever they want. But at the end of the day, God will have his justice. He will have final say. So what about Cindy Clemenchier? Because there's been all this talk. You know, the elders of Gateway have been putting out emails to congregants and to other staff saying that they had no idea, right? This was just all something that was just brought to their attention when Cindy first gave her story to the Wartburg Watch. They had absolutely no idea about how old Cindy was when all this occurred. However, emails from 2005 are now claiming otherwise. And again, I'm talking about God having these people on the ropes. Well, we're going to talk about exactly what this email correspondence had to say, because it was very interesting. Cindy Clemenchier is now being represented by Boz Chivijian. And of course, Boz specializes in this sort of mistreatment of victims in the church. Does a great job with it. And, well, we know that Cindy might not have had much luck the first go around when she attempted to get some sort of restitution at the hands of Morris. But now that she's linked up with Boz, I think things are going to change.
Now, I want to focus on, for a couple of minutes, this lady's mistreatment by Robert Morris and by Robert Morris's wife, Debbie. This proves that they are both narcissists, and this proves that Robert Morris is a sexual predator. Let's watch this.
So let's get into this. I want to mention here right off the top James Robison, because, of course, his name has been coming up a lot ever since the scandal first broke, as far as what knowledge did he have here of Robert Morris's involvement with Cindy? Did he know the age? Did he not? Did he know how long this whole thing went on for? Well, James Robison released a video on Friday night. This would have been June 21st. And he is absolutely denying having any prior knowledge of the age of Cindy when Robert Morris was involved with her. Robison claims that he only knew that, there was some sort of a moral failing in Morris's life, but he claims he did not know the age of Cindy. So that's his claim. The other thing that he said is that he's refuting and pushing back on reports that he went with Robert Morris to meet with Cindy's family when they were trying to attempt, forgiveness and healing and all of that. The original report in the Wartburg Watch had stated that Robison had gone with Morris to Cindy's parents. But Robison is saying that he was not with him at any point when he went to Cindy's parents to talk about this. And he's absolutely horrified over the allegations that Cindy has now brought forth. Also, he claims that he has a statement from Cindy's attorney saying that, in fact, Robison did have no knowledge and he was not with, Robert at the time that he approached Cindy's family. This is a very short message that his ministry put out.
Hello, I'm James Robison, and this is my wife, Betty. I'm the founder of Life Outreach International and Life Today Television. Last week, reports surfaced that Pastor Robert Morris Gateway Church had engaged in sexual assault of a child. Since then, people have been asking questions about my relationship with Robert. I'd like to set the record straight, because some people are claiming that I was present when Robert met with the victim's family in 1987 and that I knew the girl's age when these events took place. This is false. It is not so. It is, in fact, a lie. The victim herself corrected the record after the initial news report came out, letting it be known that I, in fact, wasn't there. And I have a statement here in my hand from her attorney, Cindy's attorney, attesting to the fact that I was not present at any of the meetings between Robert and the victim's family. In fact, I did not become aware of the girl's age until the news broke last week. I was stunned. I was aware that Robert had had moral failure in his past, but I had no idea it was a crime involving a child. This is totally unacceptable. The way Robert handled it was absolutely incorrect. It was wrong. Abuse of a child should not be tolerated. I would do anything to help heal Cindy and her family. Betty and I are praying for everyone who's been hurt by these terrible events.
And I agree with you, James. Our hearts are broken. What words are adequate to say anything comforting in a situation like this, except we pray for all of those involved. Join with us, I hope you will, seriously, and let's pray and ask God to heal the hurt and the pain that's been there for so long. God bless you.
However, at the same time, many people are still calling out Robeson regardless, because if you remember, Morris's original statement claims that he stepped away from ministry for a period of 2 years. That would be from 1987 to 1989. However, he didn't really step away. Now we know his time there at Shady Grove Church and everything like that, but eventually that would become, Gateway's Grand Prairie campus. But Morris simply went from Shady Grove to working with Robeson, and a lot of that work involved him doing public speaking events. He was listed as an associate evangelist with Robeson, even speaking engagements in schools, both public schools and Christian schools, where he had the nerve to talk about, of all things, morality. It was one of the main topics that he would discuss in the public schools, all the while of knowing what this guy had done to Cindy, and he has the nerve to be talking about these sorts of things and basically telling students to not do what it was that he was already doing. But again, we were supposed to believe that he was away from ministry for a whole 2 years. Even his own book in 2011, Dreams to Destiny, he talked about stepping away for only a month from the ministry, but it was due to pride. He never mentions the actual deed which he did to Cindy, which was terrible. No. Talked about how he was working as a security guard for a Motel 6. Then he got a job in the call center with James Robeson, and that was it. That he didn't have any speaking engagements, but we know that's a lie. In fact, many were posting on social media on Friday, June 21st, old newspaper clippings that showed Morris preaching revivals, even around 1988. Again, that would have been the time frame where he was supposedly not in ministry. But there he was, again, preaching a revival in October of 1988, but he was supposed to be away. See, you can't run away. I told you at the top, God's got these people on the ropes. So everything is now being revealed. It's all being put out there. So, they can attempt this damage control all they want to, but it's going to be, you can't lie when you present the proof, right to their face. So, let's get to these emails. Now, I want to point this out. I'm going to be putting a link up. It will be on my Patreon. Now, I will say this. If you join I encourage everybody, if you can. And then this ain't I don't push the prosperity gospel on anybody here. I'm not about that. I always tell people, if you want to donate, if you enjoy what I do and you want to bless me, I appreciate that. Right? Whether you do it with a super thanks on the YT video, or you join the Patreon for as little as $5 a month. But you can actually join my Patreon for free. And when you do that, you can get access to all these links and stuff that I put out there, because Patreon's just a safer place for me to include that information with the nature of what we're discussing here. So you can get access to links. You can sign up to the Patreon for free. I encourage everybody to sign up for as little as $5 a month, because when you do that, then you're going to get access to my videos before they ever hit my main YT platform. So that's what you'll unlock when you become a Patreon member. But I do have this email correspondence, and I am going to put it up for you on the Patreon. It's up there now, patreon.com/notbysightnews. Now, this is correspondence that is from April 2000. It goes from basically April of 2005 until September of 2005. And this is the time frame, again, where Cindy was reaching out to Morris, asking for restitution for what he had done. Now, upon sending an email to Morris, now this didn't go to his personal email, it went to the church's email, but Tom Lane, who at the time was serving as executive pastor for Gateway Church as well as an elder, had responded to one of Cindy's emails. Now, he had, recognized, because, Cindy had emailed Robert and said, it's been over 20 plus years of, of what you've done. And she talks about how, 100 counts. This is what she said. 100 counts of this, mistreatment of her. And I'm using that word, obviously, in place of another, but I think you know what I mean. Would send any other man to prison or have any other man have to pay punitive damages. But for you, for Robert Morris, you've done neither of those. And you've basically gone your entire life without any consequences for your actions whatsoever, which she said is wrong. Now, Tom Lane had responded to one of these emails saying, in fact, that Robert Morris, this was interesting, that Robert Morris had been open about all the details involving what happened with Cindy.
Okay, I want to stop right there. Robert Morris claimed, Tom Lane Tom Lane is going to become a key figure in this whole story. I'm watching him very close. That name keeps popping up in all the right and the wrong places. But anyway, Tom Lane there said that Robert Morris had been open and upright and honest about all the details regarding the abuse with that little girl. That's not right, because the confession that we heard there at the beginning of this broadcast, all Robert Morris confessed to was sexual inappropriate contact with a young lady. Now, I made another video about all this. A young lady is not a child. Robert Morris lied. Robert Morris covered up the truth. Robert Morris hid the truth. Robert Morris is a narcissistic sexual predator. They lie. Narcissists lie. Sexual predators cover up and they lie. This guy, Tom Lane, I've got my eyeball peeled on him. He's going to become a key player in all of this. Let's continue.
That's interesting, because Gateway elders today claim that they had no knowledge of the specifics of what was going on here. But if you look at the Tom Lane email, he claims that Morris was completely open and transparent with all of Gateway's elders, and that he believed, and this was a joke, he believed that both Robert and his wife Debbie had done everything that they could in their power to help bring healing unto Cindy. That's funny, because they didn't bring anything to her except a bunch of guilt, especially at the hands of Robert's wife Debbie, who, basically was victim shaming Cindy and saying that it was her fault about what happened to her.
And there we are. Robert Morris's wife Debbie is blaming the girl, blaming the victim of sexual abuse. I read an article where it says that Debbie accused her of flirting too much with Robert Morris. How in the world does a 12-year-old child flirt too much with a grown man, a married man with a baby? Explain that to me, please. No, Robert Morris is a narcissist. Robert Morris's wife, Debbie, is a gold-digging narcissist who doesn't want to lose all of that money that he has falsely accrued by teaching his false doctrine of the prosperity gospel. That's all she's concerned about. So she blames the child, which is absolutely disgusting to me. Let's continue.
And even said that, well, she's gotten to a point now where she's finally been able to forgive Cindy for what she's done. You know, it was her fault at 12 for being too flirtatious with her husband at the time.
Can you believe what Debbie Morris is saying? She said to that girl, Cindy, I forgive you. I guess what, for seducing my husband? Again, how does a 12-year-old child seduce anybody? What you're looking at and what we're listening to here is the story of two narcissists, Robert and Debbie Morris. This is absolutely sickening to hear this. And it makes me angry, to be quite frankly honest with you. If you can't tell by the way I'm doing this broadcast, this makes me sick to my stomach and angry. Let's continue.
That's just sick. But no, here's Tom Lane in the email saying that he believes that Robert and Debbie have done everything in their power to help bring healing towards Cindy. But by all means, Lane says, if there's anything else that we can do to help the healing process even further, please let us know. Now, Cindy was very open and honest in these emails by saying that she don't want to talk to Tom Lane. She wanted nothing to do. I don't want to hear from you, Tom. I don't want to hear from your assistant, from Robert's assistant. No, I want to hear from Robert himself. I'm done with this. So Cindy sends another email. Now we're getting around to the time of September of 2005, the same year. Well, Robert Morris himself finally responds to one of Cindy's emails, because Cindy said, and this is one of the last pieces of correspondence she sent, was telling Robert Morris that, again, you've offered no punitive damages help for me in that. You've had no consequences. You've had no jail time. Over 100 counts of this mistreatment of her when she was only 12. Remember, it lasted for 4.5 years. And so Cindy says this in her email that, if you do not respond to me, basically she was telling Robert Morris, you better contact me. She really wanted a phone call, but she says that I'm going to have to be forced to do something devastating if you do not. Now that got Robert Morris's attention. Now all of a sudden now he wants to respond.
Now let me break in here and say this. All of these mega pastors and televangelists and all these crooks and con artists and sexual deviants and perverts and narcissistic predators who use Jesus to enrich their own bank account and who use Jesus to sexually abuse women and children, it's hard to get through to them. You have to go through 2,500 people to even reach them. Absolutely deplorable, disgusting. When Jesus, I want to calm down, I'm getting worked up. When Jesus Christ walked the sandy shores of Galilee, he was accessible, he was approachable, he was reachable. He didn't have 10,000 bodyguards and 1,000 secretaries guarding him, blocking his calls, filtering his calls. He was approachable. Let me tell you something. If you go into a church and you can't talk to your pastor, you are going to the wrong church, period. I'm going to say something else. If you're going to that kind of a church, it's not a New Testament church. You are going to a cult. You are going to listen to a cult leader. Let's just break it down easy, 1, 2, 3, ABC, where everybody can understand exactly what I'm putting out today. If you cannot reach your pastor, if he's unapproachable, inaccessible, if you don't know his phone number, if you don't know the man's address, you are going to a cult, and he is a cult leader. Let's go on.
To this, right? Because now he's thinking, oh boy, what is she going to do? And in fact, that's exactly what he asked. In the email that he sends to her, and this was right around September, then we're getting into the earlier part of October of that year. And he asks Cindy, what is it that, what is it you're talking about that is so devastating, that you're going to, release? And, he even says that upon speaking to his attorneys, that Cindy could be criminally prosecuted for threatening to expose, because Cindy said she was going to, go public with this, but threatening to expose what Morris had done publicly, with financial consequences basically looming over his head, that Cindy could be held criminally, responsible, could be prosecuted for that. Interesting.
Can you believe this guy, Robert Morris? This is absurd. Threatened to prosecute the victim. Threatened her if she went public. This is lunacy. But this is exactly, ladies and gentlemen, what narcissistic sexual predators do. They try to intimidate, manipulate, and to dominate. This is Robert Morris. This is him trying to threaten this victim with prosecution if she dared to expose him. That guy, Robert Morris, he needs to be in a penitentiary today. Today. I was a prison chaplain 20 years, and I met men in there for less crimes than he did to this girl. Robert Morris needs to be incarcerated and the key thrown away. Let's continue.
Very interesting. Also, Robert Morris had said in his email that perhaps that Cindy should consult with her father about this. This man, Robert Morris, had the nerve to bring up this woman's father, who he lied and said that the father gave him the blessing to return back to the ministry, when he never did, according to Cindy Clemenshire. But no, by all means, Cindy, go seek the advice of your father. I respect his wisdom and his counsel, and perhaps you should do the same before you think about doing anything rash here as far as putting anything out public. Even though Morris said he'd be fine with whatever coming out public, but then he tried to, scare her with that little intimidation tactic right there. Now, there's a lot more in the email correspondence, and again, I will have that link for you actually it's on the Patreon, patreon.com/notbysitenews. So go check it out there. But let's also not forget that what this eventually all led to was in fact a legal confrontation of sorts, because we know that Cindy had eventually then contacted, Robert's attorneys and said that she was seeking $50,000 in punitive damages. Okay? Not so she could take the money to go buy a car, but because she wanted to use that money and put it towards all of the, the counseling bills and therapy bills that she had accumulated over the years, thanks to what Robert Morris did to her. And remember how this was responded to by Robert's attorneys. They basically accused Cindy, much like Robert's wife Debbie did, they basically accused Cindy of being flirtatious with Robert, said $50,000 was way too much. They'd give her $25,000 and make her sign an NDA. We know she didn't take that. But again, the fact that, an NDA, they don't want her to talk about it. Of course, they wanted this to go away. Funny how Morris was okay with it being public, but then when, this potential settlement offer was put out there, well, you're going to have you sign an NDA. We don't really want you talking about this.
And for those of you that may not know what an NDA is, that's a non-disclosure agreement. It's a legal agreement, and the person signs that agreement promising never to discuss the contents of whatever the case is going on or whatever the situation it is. Once you sign that, the case is closed. You can never talk about that again. This is what Robert Morris and these narcissistic attorneys wanted the victim to do. And they didn't want to give her the $50,000 to help the girl pay her bills or counseling bills, where he had sexually assaulted her for her 5 years of all of her teenage years. They wanted to give her $25,000 with a shut up clause. That's what that was. And she said, no, thanks. We're going public. Hello, friends. I hope you're enjoying today's program. If it's a blessing to you, I would encourage you to like the video, to comment on it, and most importantly, to subscribe to my YouTube channel, share these videos. We want to get the message of the true truth, of the true gospel out there. And the more you like my videos and comment on them and subscribe, then that helps the algorithm. Again, I pray that today's show has been a blessing to you, and we're going to get right back into it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Let's get back into today's program. Hello, friends. We're offering a special book, Christian Doctrines from an Arminian perspective. I know a lot of you request me of the question, where can I get a good book on doctrines? Well, I've finished this one, and I cover every doctrine, every major doctrine in Christianity. The doctrine of God, the doctrine of Jesus Christ, the doctrine of the Holy Spirit, the doctrine of the Scriptures, the doctrine of man, the doctrine of salvation, the doctrine of man's free will, the doctrine of perseverance, the doctrine of heaven, the doctrine of hell, the doctrine of sanctification, the doctrine of demons, the doctrine of Satan, the doctrine of evangelism and global missions, the millennial reign. And I have one chapter that I've dedicated to all the false doctrines in the world today, the major ones. So be sure to avail yourself of this special offer. And I'm not charging anything for this. I am accepting any size donation or love offering. And if you can't afford it, then I will get this ebook. It's an ebook. It's not a paperback book. It's an ebook that I will email to you. It's about nearly 300 pages long. And so it's a book on all the fundamental doctrines of Christianity. Make sure and order your copy of this today. Now let's get back into the program.
Cindy Clemenshire is absolutely right. This man has faced no real consequences whatsoever for his actions. And here's the thing, for the people that are saying, well, he's getting what he deserves now. He's resigned from his position. Okay, he's resigned as pastor of Gateway Church. Does that take away all the millions upon millions of dollars this man has stacked over the decades? Knowing what he did, how he started off in ministry? Absolutely not. Is he going to give any of those millions to Cindy for what she's had to, endure for the majority of her life? Absolutely not. So what? So he doesn't preach another Sunday sermon again for the rest of his life. This guy was a heretic anyway to begin with. He was preaching false doctrine from the start. Now you add in what he did to Cindy, and it just makes it even worse. This guy could sit pretty for the rest of his life with all the millions that he's made off the backs of those of Gateway Church that were duped in his tithing schemes over the years, which I've talked about plenty of times before. The prosperity gospel. I mean, Robert Morris was known for going around different churches too and offering a money-back guarantee if they didn't see the blessings in their life from God the way that he presented it in his messages. But he's sitting pretty for the rest of his life. He don't have to preach anymore. He did what he came to do. You don't need to. But there is more coming. Because again, why would Cindy retain the services of Boz Chivijian? Boz is the one, by the way, who released all the email correspondence. And by the way, good on Cindy for saving all of that. Boz released those emails to the Royce Report. which is where I got this email correspondence from. And again, you can find those emails on the Patreon at patreon.com/notbysightnews. Remember, you can look at those. You can sign up to my Patreon for free, and you can get these links. But again, I encourage you guys to, become paid members, $5 a month, and then, you're going to get access to these videos that I do before they ever go on my main YT channel. So there is going to be another lawsuit here coming. You know that there is, especially when you got Boz on the case. And again, it's not enough for Robert Morris to just resign, and I know other ministries have been dropping him as well. Cindy is going to get the justice that she's looking for here. But again, what this has done, it has put a huge spotlight on the church as a whole, and the stain that people like Morris and so many others have caused. We are now getting into a point where, we are getting, I believe, very close to the return of the Lord in the last days. That's why you are seeing so many of these wolves now being outed. And it's going to continue. You have to use discernment in these last days as we continue to press forward, because this is not going to be the end of this. There's going to be a lot more that come after Morris. And we definitely want justice for Cindy. And I will be definitely keeping you guys up to date on all that goes on with this case as it continues to develop.
Okay, so for the remainder of today's show, I've got a couple of videos for you to see about narcissism and sexual predators. Some narcissists are also sexual predators. This is what Robert Morris is. He's a narcissistic, self-centered, egotistical, sexual predator. Let's watch these videos.
Hey everyone, Sparrow Spalding here, and today I want to talk about narcissism and sexual abuse. And this is a heavy topic, and what really brought it to mind for me lately was the whole situation with the Dalai Lama that just came out, right? That everybody saw the video of him kissing the little boy and then asking him to suck his tongue, and we're going to get into that. But I really wanted to do a video about sexual abuse in general, because in order to be a predator, you have to be a narcissist. Now, you might be a sociopath, or you might even be a psychopath too, who knows? But you at least have to be a narcissist in order to be a predator. Now, it doesn't mean that all narcissists are sexual predators. That is not what I'm saying, okay? So please, no hate mail. But in order to be a predator, one must be narcissistic, right? And if you look at a lot of the behaviors of sexual groomers and sexual abuse predators, right? A lot of those behaviors are the same behaviors that a narcissist uses to groom a victim. So they're very similar, right? And first we start off with that sense of entitlement, right? I'm entitled to this person, so therefore I'm going to manipulate them into liking me, loving me, having a relationship with me, etc., right? And then that whole manipulation in and of itself, very narcissistic, right? Very self-centered. They're not going to be honest. They're not going to be authentic. They're going to be a version of themselves, or what some people call the personal representative, to attract you in, to suck you in, to manipulate you, right? And then they're going to do their thing, right? And abusers are very much the same way. Now, not all abusers are groomers. Some people will just go in, they seize an opportunity, and they haven't groomed that victim, right? And that's where, that behavior can really go into the sociopathic and even psychopathic realms, in my humble opinion. But, the average narcissist will spend some time grooming their victim, right? So when I looked at the whole situation with the Dalai Lama, I was horrified at first, right? I was just like, what in the world? And I was just so disenchanted. I was like, yeah, here's another religious leader going after little children, little boys, right? It seems to be an age-old issue since the dawn of man. And then, a few people on the internet said, well, wait a second, this is cultural, and, he didn't really mean this, and, he misspoke, and we are not understanding the culture and the tradition, yada, yada, right? And so I thought, okay, fair enough. Let me dive into this a little bit. Maybe I'm making a hasty decision about the Dalai Lama. I'm not a Buddhist, by the way, but, he is this worldwide religious leader. and mentor and figure, correct? So I said, all right, let me go into this. And so I researched some Tibetan culture. I couldn't find anything that said it's customary for people to stick out their tongue and say, suck my tongue, right? And people said, no, it's not about that. He misspoke. He meant to say, eat my tongue. So I looked that up. Okay, research that. Okay, yeah, there might be a custom where the Tibetans might say, okay, you've gotten everything else from me. Now please eat my tongue or whatever. But they don't stick their tongue out waiting for somebody to eat it, right? This was a whole different level with what happened here. And by the way, as an aside, the Dalai Lama hasn't lived in Tibet. He moved to India in 1959. That was a long time ago, okay? So, talk about moving to Tibetan cultures over to India, they're not one and the same. And, this took place in India. This little boy was Indian. He wasn't Tibetan. Why would he understand this culture? And I watched this video, by the way, in slow motion, in real time, over and over, analyzing every little thing. And what I saw was that little boy pull away when the Dalai Lama stuck his tongue out. And the Dalai Lama stuck his tongue out, wanting them to touch tongues. Watch the video, and a lot of the videos stop at that point. I'll put a link of the video down below. If you watch the entire thing, they're actually touching tongues. This is so disturbing to me. Now, again, I'm going to say this. You've got a bunch of flying monkeys, right, coming out and saying, oh, no, that he was just being playful. He was this, he was that. I don't buy it. The guy is almost 90 years old. There's a certain way to be playful and appropriate, and there's a way to just be crass and rude and abusive and infringing upon this little boy's personhood and sovereignty. I mean, it's very violating behavior, in my opinion, in my educated and personal opinion. So there was somebody online who kind of gave this long explanation of why this wasn't abusive. And I wrote back and I said, no, I disagree, and here's the reasons why. And this person, long story short, kind of a well-known person, by the way, has been on the Oprah Winfrey Show, sent me a private message saying that, basically, if I didn't understand and get on the bandwagon, that it was racism. She didn't come out and call me a racist, but it was kind of calling me a racist through the back door. And I said to her, hey, if anyone researches stuff to the nth degree, it's me. Now, I won't lie, my initial reaction was horror and disgust, but I did stop and I did listen to what other people were saying, and I dove down that rabbit hole, and I did research the culture, and I looked at everything, and my conclusion is this behavior was highly, highly inappropriate. But again, you're going to have every narcissist has flying monkeys. Do I believe the Dalai Lama is a narcissist? I honestly think it's entirely possible. I can't say for certain. I haven't met the person. I haven't studied him enough, but I do know enough about him to where, to be honest, you know who he reminds me of? He reminds me of Michael Jackson. And here's why. Michael Jackson had obviously an abusive father, right? And from a very early age, he was told who he was going to be. He was going to be this big pop star from a little kid, right? The Dalai Lama, from 4 years old approximately, was told, you're the Dalai Lama. And we could go down that rabbit hole. I'll save that for another video. But neither of these individuals, Dalai Lama, Michael Jackson, were able to develop their own personal sovereignty. They were told who they were going to be and what was expected of them from very early on. And so when you think about that, when you think about Michael Jackson, of course, there were a lot of abuse allegations, right? And there's some people that think he was abusive, some people who insist that he was not. But if you look at him, he was also very playful, childlike. I mean, he built Neverland. He built this big amusement park. He had all of this plastic surgery to look like Peter Pan, right? He wanted to surround himself with little boys. And some of these boys have come forward and said inappropriate things have happened. So when I look at the psychology, just as a preliminary thought, I'm like, I'm seeing some similarities. I'm going to have to dig even deeper. I'm not a person who likes to come to conclusions lightly. I really want to research this, and I'm not here to diagnose anybody, certainly not anybody famous or people I have not met. And I'm retired, by the way. I don't diagnose anymore. However, I do think that we need to be really, really careful here and not explain away obvious behavior and say, well, he was just being playful. Guess what? A lot of groomers are playful, right? And these were kids who went through the Dalai Lama's school, right? So these little kids were coming up talking to, I think they call him HH, right? I think, is that His Holiness? I'm not entirely sure. But so, is there any grooming going on? And is there sexual abuse allegations within the Buddhist community? There are. I will put links down below about those. And, we see it a lot in the religious community, right? And by the way, we know that a lot of narcissists are attracted to the religious community and being religious leaders, right? The power, the influence, the entitlement, all of that. The bottom line, narcissism and being a sexual predator do go hand in hand. And we really, really need to pay attention and be discerning. And just because someone's a religious figure or just because someone's rich and famous doesn't mean that they're immune, that we can make excuses, that they're not a predator, that they're not a narcissist. So really, really think about this. If you're on the fence about this, do your own research. I really encourage you to do your own research. If you are an abuse survivor, by the way, my heart goes out to you. It is a tough thing to deal with, and especially if you've grown up with narcissists in your life or your abusers have been narcissists. I do want to recommend my book, Uncaged. Trauma recovery using facet integration technique. It is my theory on trauma and trauma recovery. It's a workbook and a book. I talk about my personal experiences in here along with several of my clients over the years. And it really is a how-to for getting unstuck, moving forward from narcissistic abuse and just, general traumas that everyone experiences in life, big or small.
Hey folks, Michael Mann from Michael Mann Security Services. Welcome to webinar number 7, Deterring and Detecting Sexual Predators. Hey, before we get started, we're going to talk about getting a hold of us. We get emails throughout the week, and we want you to continue to send those to us so we can answer those, reach out to you guys, and provide you guys with information that you need to protect your house of worship or ministry. So here's how you get a hold of us. Website, michaelmannsecurityservices.com. We have now on the website, we've got these webinars, or we've got 4 or 5 of these webinars on the website. So if you go into the resources, you can see those. So if you haven't gone to our Facebook page and you want to see our past webinars, they are now on the website. Please feel free to go on there and view those and send us any questions. If you go to michaelmannsecurityservices.com, obviously you can ask questions. You can email us from the website there, and we will answer pretty quickly. You can also call us. That phone number, 615-606-1006, is Scott Milesby. Scott's the business guy. He will be more than happy to take your phone call and get right back to you. You can do that at any time. He'll be glad to call you right back or answer your questions or any questions that you have. You can email us at ScottM, SCOTTM, at michaelmannsecurityservices.com. And, of course, you can go to our Facebook page and Instagram at Safe with Man. Okay. Hey, a couple things next week before we get started here. Let's talk about what we got coming up. Big one next week. It's protecting your house of worship against terrorism. You've heard me talk a little bit about terrorism and the threats to your house of worship. Not probably really high up on your threat spectrum, but I've got some really good information next week, 4 p.m. Central Time to 5 p.m. So it is an hour-long seminar. We're going to talk about terrorist attacks in the last year to 2 years in the United States of America that have occurred against houses of worship or churches. We're going to categorize terrorists for you. We're going to talk about their tactics, their procedures, their techniques. And then I'm going to give you some basics on anti-terrorism strategy for your church, your house of worship, or your ministry. All right? We've got some fun stuff coming up this weekend. Saturday, we're going to be partnered up with the USCCA. We're going to be doing an urban rifle class, so we're going to have some video for that for you for that next week on the Facebook page and on the website. So stay tuned for that. There may be some cool stuff coming out of that. All right. So let's talk about now just quickly where we're going to do, what's going to happen over the next 30 minutes. So this is again, detecting and deterring sexual predators. This is about 30 minutes, folks. We're going to get into the role of the security ministry in protecting against sexual predators. Now, here's what this is not. This is an overview for you as a security team or ministry, okay? This is not a step-by-step process to tell a church how to protect themselves. This gets into our role as the protection team and how we can assist those ministries and what it is we're looking for when we start to talk about sexual predators. So this is an overview of what we do as protectors. This is more of a policy compliance presentation as opposed to a policy development. So I'm not going to tell you how to write the policy. I'm going to tell you how we look for certain things and then how we follow a policy compliance procedure as we go through this process, okay? We're going to approach this always from a risk perspective. So I'm going to cover what's the threat. So we're going to talk about that in detail. We're going to cover what are the system weaknesses or vulnerabilities, and then we're going to get into the countermeasures, which a lot of you guys and ladies are going to want to hear. And then I'm going to talk about a couple of case studies that I've dealt with personally when we start talking about sexual predators in the church to kind of help you understand some of the things that we're talking about implementing and why we would want to follow some of the policies that are in place. Okay? At the end of this, if you have any questions or during the presentation, write those questions down, send them to Scott. He's monitoring the Facebook page. And at the end of this presentation here in about 25 minutes or so, I'll take those questions and I will answer those questions for you. Okay? All right. So without any other delay, we're going to get started. All right? So I go over this every week, and I like to remind security teams and ministries of this. Remember, even when we talk about sexual predators and that strategy, which we're going to get into, the security ministry's primary objective is not to restrict or deny access to the church, okay? Our role is early identification of threat-related incidents, and we're going to talk about that in this presentation with sexual predators. And again, conflict avoidance should be implemented into your design criteria, and what that means is our mission, our job, our strategy should not conflict with the mission of the church, which obviously is to spread the good word of Jesus Christ, to get the folks inside those sanctuaries and those worship centers and give them good news and save them, okay? Or at least lead them through that path, okay? So again, our job, our primary mission is not to deny access. It's to look for those threats early, and it's not to, obviously, not to conflict with the mission of the church. All right, so let's talk about the threat. All right, so the threat. Sexual predators, by definition, it is an adversary. You guys, I've talked about adversaries the past several webinars, that tries to obtain sexual contact with another person. That is a general definition of a sexual predator. Now, when we talk about predators or sexual predators, again, they are predatory in nature. I'm going to get into that here later on in the presentation. What that means, that's going to help you know what to look for when you're looking for a sexual predator. So, predatory in nature. Number two, by nature, it is also abusive. This is abusive behavior. Number three, it is illegal. It is against the law. It's another reason why this is important for us. It also can be consensual, of those acts, and non-consensual. I'm going to give you a case study where we get into that and talk about a sexual predator that was discovered in a church and some activities that occurred that were later on in court found out to be consensual, but it was still illegal. So the act itself can be consensual or not consensual. And then, of course, sexual predators hide in the open. We're going to talk about that especially with insider threats. Insider threats hide in the open. They're out in front of us, and a lot of times we as ministry leaders do not see them. Okay, so that is a sexual predator. So let's get into really quick, before we get into strategy, these types of sexual predators. Now remember, this is a general overview. And I'm going to add some things to this here later on to make it easier for you to understand as a security professional what it is we're looking for and some of the behaviors we're looking for. So we talk about the types. We're going to talk about, basically generalize them into two. Number one is a child sex abuser. A child sex abuser is, or child sex abuse is when an adult or older adolescent uses a child for sexual stimulation. Now, understand, you guys have probably heard this term pedophile, or pedophilia. Pedophilia is a sexual preference for children that may or may not lead to child sexual abuse. So a pedophile can be a pedophile, so they could prefer children sexually, but that may not lead to abuse or anything even illegal. So when we hear child sexual predators, and sometimes we'll say, yes, that person's a pedophile. Understand, a child sexual predator can be a pedophile, so they can prefer, their sexual preference can be for children, but they may not break the law and they may never abuse that child. Okay? All right. A rapist is a type of sexual assault carried out against a person without that person's consent, and we're going to go back to this later for strategy, and we're also going to talk about this in a case study. Okay? So types of sexual predators, that child sex abuser, and then of course that rapist. And we talk about pedophiles. Remember, pedophiles, they have a sexual preference for children that may or may not lead to child sexual abuse. All right? So just in case there's some confusion about that. All right. So as security professionals, so as you guys, if you look at my background, you go to my webpage or you look me up online, you're going to see that I designed government security programs and manage those programs for quite a while. And so in the government world, when we talk about adversaries, we have two types: insider adversaries, outsider adversaries. In my world that I was in for a long time, insider is somebody that has knowledge of the physical protection system, and then an outsider is somebody that doesn't have any knowledge of that protection system. So I want to use those two terms because we've talked about them before, and if you've taken some of my other webinars, or if you paid attention to some other things that we put out, I like to use the same terminology. So let me kind of break this down so it's easier for you. So for today, think about an outsider threat when we talk about sexual predators as that adversary that does not have general access to the asset. That asset being here, we're talking about the children and those youth that we're trying to protect. So they don't have general access to the asset. Here's what that means. They probably don't attend church. So they're not attending the church that you're protecting, more than likely. They don't have knowledge of the current protective measures. And because they're not normally there, or maybe they don't go there, maybe they're just there trying to get information because they want to do something, but they don't have general access to that asset, it requires the outsider to gather intelligence about your church. This is going to be important later on, okay? That insider threat is an adversary that does have general access to the asset. So it's somebody that goes to church there, more than likely. They are a regular attendee, or they could be. They have knowledge or could have knowledge of current protective measures, including our protective measures as a security team or ministry, and also the protective measures that are in place by the children's ministry. So like check-in processes and rules they have around restrooms and background investigations. And the insider threat may also be currently volunteering or serving with a ministry. Okay? So as I talk about insider-outsider threats, to keep the verbiage the same when we talk about physical protection, like with all the other stuff we talked about in the past, I want to talk about it, and you're going to hear me say insider and outsider. This is what this means. Normally we talk about an outsider, because this does happen. We're talking about that rapist or that person that tries to come out and conducts intelligence or surveillance on the church to kidnap or sexually assault someone outside so they don't come inside. And then normally when we talk about an insider threat, we're talking about somebody, some abuse that happens within the church, which is a big problem today. The insider threat is, as I start to look at statistics and data, is a much bigger threat than when we start talking about that outsider. That person that's kind of stalking outside the property looking to snatch somebody, and that the adversary doesn't go to church there. All right? All right. So let's move on. So let me give you a case study when we talk about outsiders. Okay? This is a case study. This happened in a church in Middle Tennessee, not far from us. Not going to give you the church, but I will tell you how we got the details. Number one, got the details from law enforcement because it was in a city where we have law enforcement connections, number one, in Middle Tennessee. And number two, there was somebody in our security ministry that served our ministry at the time that actually worked at this church and was very knowledgeable of the incident, okay? And we found out about it the day it happened. And so, very large church located in Middle Tennessee, and at the time, the children's ministry, which it still is, it's a very large church. It's a mega church. The children's ministry is, at the time, like now, it's part of the building, but it's separated. And at the time, that designated space and location where the children's ministry is located had symbolic barriers. Now, a symbolic barrier is not something that's going to physically stop an adversary, but it's rules and signage and things that psychologically tell an adversary, or could, that what that person's supposed to be doing, okay? Or as the adversary, some things that they're not supposed to be doing, all right? So things like signage, they had volunteers there watching as people came in to drop their kids off, so there were no physical barriers like card readers or locked doors at the time. The church, just like today, that church has a police presence, had a uniformed off-duty police officer on site, and also plainclothes officers inside the sanctuary. Now, what they did not have, and I don't think they still have that, is a security ministry that was practicing those concentric rings, which we're going to get into. So there was a police officer in uniform that directed traffic and occasionally would go in and kind of make rounds inside the church. And then there are plainclothes officers inside the sanctuary that's there that I'm assuming to protect the pastor, I guess. Okay? So suspicious activity. Here's what happens. There is a woman that they discover wandering around inside the children's ministry area during service. A volunteer sees this woman and challenges the woman because the woman is inside or in the space of the children's ministry, and she doesn't appear to be with a child. They don't see a name tag or like a security tag as if this person's going to come, this woman's going to come and claim a child. And so a volunteer does challenge this woman. The woman gets irate to the point where the volunteer has to somehow communicate to the off-duty uniformed police officer that they may need assistance in the children's ministry. So the uniformed off-duty officer that's again there for traffic control, conducts rounds, does come in to figure out what's happening, and the police officer confronts this woman. As the police officer starts to ask questions, this woman gets more irate. The off-duty officer has to call for assistance from on-duty police officers. On-duty police officers show up, and as they start to make contact with this adversary, they end up having to arrest this person. As they arrest this woman, they quickly find out that it is not a woman. It is a man dressed as a woman that has been walking around the children's ministry. The person is arrested for disorderly conduct and then some abusive language, because as they start to make contact with this person, obviously this now appears to be an adversary, and this adversary has been caught. As they transport this person to the county jail, not only do they find out this is a man, but they also find out this is a person that is illegally in the United States, and this person is also a convicted sexual offender. Okay? So predatory behavior was detected and validated during this investigation. Also, what they found out from some of the people as they took this person into custody and they figured out it was a man, some people in the congregation said, "Hey, I believe we saw this man on our property in the church a couple of weeks ago more than once." And so what was validated with this outsider threat who got near the children's ministry at the time, there were symbolic barriers up only. What they had figured out, or what they thought, was they had seen this man a couple weeks before wandering around the church as a man, and then what it appears is this convicted sexual predator illegally in this country, dressed as a woman, gets in the children's ministry, and is an outsider threat. They believe it's possible that he was going to try to snatch a child or sexually abuse a child. So just a case study when we start talking about the threat process, or the outsider threat process of what an outsider may look like. To come in from the outside, again, this was a convicted sexual predator or offender, comes in dressed as a woman disguised, is caught inside the children's ministry, and they believe was conducting hostile surveillance prior to the actual getting inside the children's ministry dressed or disguised as a woman. Now, I'll get into surveillance here in a few minutes, but surveillance by definition, I said hostile surveillance. Let me explain the difference between the two. Surveillance by definition is when you or I put something or some place or location under observation for the purpose of gathering information. There's not anything illegal about that, but hostile surveillance is the observation of a person, place, or thing for the purpose of conducting a successful attack, whether that's to kidnap, to rape, to sexually assault, or even to conduct some sort of a stronghold assault like an active shooter situation. Okay? So just a quick case study that did happen here in Middle Tennessee. We have insider knowledge of that because It happened. We had knowledge of it when it happened immediately. And then, of course, we had somebody on security ministry that worked at this church, and we were kind of told the details of what happened. So actual case study of the outsider threat process. This will be important later on when we get into strategy. Okay? So predatory behavior, going to get into this. We talked about what predatory is. I'm going to talk about what this means. Predatory behavior is a pattern of behavior that may indicate harmful intentions toward another person. What this means is, especially the outsider threat, and the insider threat will also do this, they have to conduct surveillance, hostile surveillance. We talked about what hostile surveillance is. Again, observation of person, place, or thing for the purpose of conducting some sort of an attack. Requirements for hostile surveillance. Number one, they have to see the target. That can be your church or that can be a specific person or child. So they have to have observation of that potential target. Number two, they have to have cover and concealment. Cover does not necessarily mean in this situation what cover means like in tactics, like something to hide behind to stop bullets. Cover is a reason why they are there, or a cover story. Okay? And if you've taken our Israeli Security Concepts course, then you understand exactly what that means. Concealment just means that could mean something they hide in, a surveillance platform. So that could be a vehicle, it could be landscaping, it could be trees or something that they conceal themselves in. And then they have to have access to the target. They physically have to get into the building, or they have to be able to put their hands on that target. So those are those requirements for hostile surveillance. Something else when we talk about predatory behavior, the characteristics, there is a change in behavior based on the situation or environment. So if you go to talk to that person, an outsider, there's deception. You may catch some deception in that person as you talk to that person, in their story, in their cover. Okay? Again, this is covered on our Israeli Security Concepts class, and if you've had that training from us, this is nothing new. And then, of course, when we start to talk about change in behavior, deception could also be very specifically for the insider. That could mean persuasion, it can mean influence, it could mean charm, personality, or authority, and we're going to talk about this in another case study. All right. So let's get into, we've talked about the threat itself, let's get into the vulnerabilities of the church. You guys are seeing this, we're going to go over it very quickly, and then we're getting into the countermeasures, okay? Vulnerability. So here's what I see when I look at other churches, other security teams, if we're called in to do an assessment for something, here's some things that I see that can be vulnerabilities, especially when we're talking about detecting and deterring the sexual predator. Number one, lack of surveillance detection capability from the security ministry. You've heard me say this before if you've watched other webinars of ours or you've attended. As I pass other churches on Sunday, very specifically before this COVID-19 masquerade, what I see is, or what I don't see, is I don't see security ministries outside. So I don't see the layered approach. I don't see the concentric rings. So if there is a security ministry, for whatever reason, they're tucked inside. I don't see a lot of ministries outside at the building and then inside the building. I don't see those concentric rings of protection. So that is a vulnerability, especially when we talk about this other case study, when we talked about this large church that we just mentioned. They had police officers inside. They had a police officer in uniform outside directing traffic, but they did not practice that layered approach, and so that adversary was not detected. A lack of force multipliers. Here's what a force multiplier is in physical protection. It's combining ministries to provide security with abilities to accomplish greater protection objectives than without it. So what that means is, if I'm the security lead, I'm going to use greeters. I'm going to use other ministries to help me detect things. So that's a force multiplier. I can use another ministry as another set of eyes to be looking for things. And I'm going to train them on how to do that. And that doesn't mean that you have to bring them in for 8 hours. It could be an hour-long class on what surveillance and surveillance detection means. And then one of the biggest vulnerabilities is always the ministry is unaware of those insider threats. And so there may be a lack of a comprehensive background inquiry program, or there may not be training provided to a ministry on how to conduct a background, what they're looking for in a background process, and the different type of background inquiries that exist today. Okay? So here's some of the vulnerabilities, again, that I've seen with ministries very specifically when we talk about sexual predators or detecting and deterring those predators. So let's get into countermeasures. So we've already said this: use a layered approach or use the concentric rings of protection. And this is for us, the security ministry. So concentric rings, the purpose of that is early identification of threat-related activity. We try to keep this mess in the parking lot, especially for outsider adversaries, those outsider sexual predators. We want to see it early. We see it outside. We want to identify it prior to entering the protected space. So if we have an outsider threat, like what happened at this mega church we just talked about, this case study, we want to see that outside 3 weeks before the incident occurs. We want to pick up that suspicious activity and go up and validate that. We want to ask the questions. We talked about, again, go back to the case study, no layered approach at that mega church that we talked about, where this man dressed as a woman was detected, was caught, was arrested, and then we found out this background that it was this person was a convicted sexual offender. Okay? You guys, if you tuned in to the one of the seminars we had or webinars a couple of weeks ago, this is how concentric rings work. This is a mall in Israel several years back. You can see a security guard right here, just kind of perched looking. There's a suicide bomber with a big bag of Semtex that's going to try to blow this mall up. This is north of Tel Aviv. He sees the guard. You see this up here. Looks. Because that guard is observing, he's walking toward him now. What that did, that deterred that suicide bomber, that bag of Semtex. He was diverted to another part of the building. He did detonate himself, but it was done outside. And instead of 300 or 400 people being killed, there were a couple of, which is unfortunate, of Israeli security personnel and Israeli police officers killed because they cornered him. Okay, so just from being observant and being outside using concentric rings of protection, my goodness, if they can deter, an unarmed guard can deter a suicide bomber that's on a death mission, surely we can deter those other adversaries like sexual predators. All right? Asset-based security ministries, an asset-based approach. You've heard this from me before. This comes from us, the security ministry. Protection when the critical assets are on site. Services, special events, and if you've got the ability to do it, I would want to do it anytime youth is on site, especially when there's a large number of youth or children on site for some sort of after-hours event. What this does is, again, we take an asset-based approach not there all the time, but if we can be here at these times, we can pick them. When that asset-based approach is used, that's going to save resources. All right? Communication. As the security team, if we see something, we document this in a suspicious activity report. I've got a report that I use for our ministry that I got from some organization years ago. If you want that report, it's you can do it on a computer or in your computer, so you can write this down in field notes, and you can later type it in and send that report out. Email Scott at scottm@michaelmannsecurityservice.com, and I'll have him send that to you, or you can ask for it. He'll send it to you. So you can document these things in a suspicious activity report, especially if we see something that looks like hostile surveillance. Once you document that in a report, you track that report and you share it with other ministries. And obviously you're going to communicate at that next roll call or that next guard mount. If you're doing roll calls before your team goes out or your ministry goes out, you can communicate that during those roll calls and during those guard mounts. So something else we communicate, we document and communicate the things that we saw the week before or 2 weeks before, very specifically, if we believe it to be hostile surveillance. All right? You are, or we are, the eyes and ears for the church, so we help the other ministries with check-in processes. We're not physically doing it. We're just keeping an eye on those check-in processes to make sure we don't detect any kind of suspicious activity. Bathroom rules, you should have bathroom rules on your church. You're not there really enforcing those rules, but if you're using concentric rings of protection, then you're probably going to have someone stationed near those bathrooms just by chance because of posts or where the posts are located, security posts, and you can observe, and that security volunteer can keep an eye on those bathrooms for those other ministries. And then, of course, we don't develop background policies, but we can assist with those background inquiries or investigations if there's a question from the ministry that's managing that. Okay? From the church, a background investigation or inquiry, that's really what it is. It's not really an investigation. They're really just running open source reports, so you're paying for that, or the church is. Everybody that's on staff, part-time staff members, or anyone that serves should actually be, it should be mandatory for that person to go through a background investigation or inquiry. So if it's a staff member, part-time staff member, or anybody that serves, they should have to go through that background process. Now the scope, a basic scope, should include a verification of identity, so make sure they are who they say they are. And that's gonna go, part of that process is going to be a Social Security number search. They should go through a criminal record search, and of course, they should also be part of a sex offender registry. That check normally runs about $12 to $15, so it's not expensive. Case study, real quick. Something else that also should be added to this, outside of the check itself, should be knowledge and disclosure of prior incidents. Another case study. This happened in Middle Tennessee at another large church in Nashville several years ago. I know one of the victims. The victim is now a grown woman. This happened when she was a teenager. So a very large church, not too far from this location, several years ago, had hired a volunteer in the youth music program. This person was a sexual predator. The church did not know. Now, they ran a background check. There were no arrests from the information that I have. But what happened was he had just not gotten caught. There was an incident prior to this that was inappropriate. A ministry leader knew about it, but did not tell the church about it. Okay, so here's what happened. This was a music volunteer, part of this big youth music program. There were two teenage girls, 15 years of age at the time. This person used influence and his position to influence one of the teenage girls, had sex with this underage girl at the church twice. This other young lady, the other victim, she would go off-site, so she would go to this person's house. It was approved by the church to go through this music program. One of the times she goes to this person's house, this volunteer's house. He tries to sexually assault her, he does sexually assault her. Doesn't have sex with her, but does assault her under the law, using his influence and persuasion. It shocks her. She goes home. She's afraid to tell her parents. Goes back a second time. Mom drops her off. She goes back. He tries again. At this time, she screams, says no, goes home, tells her parents what happened. There's an investigation. The person is arrested. There is a court case. He is convicted. And then, of course, his volunteer service is termed from the church. This could have been possibly could have been stopped if the ministry leader, I don't know what part of the church this ministry leader worked in, but there was knowledge that this suspect or this adversary was part of some inappropriate behavior at some other location or some ministry before coming to this church, and that was not shared. Again, this person was charged and convicted for statutory rape and for sexual assault, and of course that person was dismissed as a volunteer from that church. So another case study where background inquiries and knowledge, any disclosure of any knowledge of incidents prior to, again, need to be communicated in the church. Okay? All right. Just some things to think about. Background investigations are open source, which means it's not a fingerprint. A name is given, and so there's open source information. That's what the church is being paid they're paying the service. Not all charges or convictions require denial of service or access to assets. What that means is, if the church got a volunteer and they had a DUI 25 years ago, a DUI is probably not going to preclude that person from working around children. That's something that happened. That person was in college years ago, and so you would have an adjudication process to work that person through the process to make sure that person can or cannot be with children or whatever. But again, something like DUI or something that's a nonviolent offense and has nothing to do with children or the risk of children, that may not take that person out of the ability to be around kids. All right, so there should be an adjudication process in place. Something else to look for if you're not doing it at your church: two-person rule in physical security is access to critical assets like kids requires the presence of two authorized persons at all times. So could be a good probability or possibility that there's an insider threat of one person, but it's going to be hard to find two people that are going to be willing to be an insider threat. And so that second person acts as a validation or that second security check. So there's always two people around children at all times. lessens the probability, again, for an insider threat incident. Okay? Again, I told you that was a quick overview. If you've got any questions, get those to Scott. Any questions? Nothing? Okay. All right, folks. Hope you got some good information. It was a brief overview, but I hope you got something out of it. If you've got any questions, again, you can get us at michaelmannsecurityservices.com on our website. This presentation of this webinar will be on the website next week with all the other webinars that are downloaded on the resources page. You can call us anytime at 615-606-1006. You can get us at scottm@michaelmannsecurityservices.com, or you can get us on our Facebook and Instagram page at Safe with Man. Thanks for tuning in. Again, come see us next week. Tune in at 4 p.m., same time, same bat channel right here, protecting your house of worship against terrorism. We've got some folks that have already registered for it. It is going to be one of our best webinars ever, I promise. I'm going to take my 30-plus years of anti-terrorism experience, studying this overseas in Israel and Europe, working in anti-terrorism in the Marine Corps and developing anti-terrorism programs for big corporations. Going to take a lot of that and put that into an hour presentation to help you guys understand what that means for the threat or risk to your church. All right, folks, again, thanks for joining us. And remember, it's about prevention, not response.
And that will conclude our program today. Thank you for being with me on the Word of Truth broadcast.